You know that feeling when you wake up in the middle of the night and something just feels wrong? Like someone's been watching you sleep? Well, I used to think that was just paranoia. Used to think my mind was playing tricks on me when I'd hear footsteps in an empty house, or find things move just slightly out of place. I don't think that anymore. What happened to me last month while house sitting for my friend Sarah, it's changed how I see everything, how I lock my doors, how I check my windows, how I sleep at night. Because sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what's lurking in the shadows. It's what's already inside, watching, waiting, learning your routine. And sometimes they're polite enough to send you a thank you note. Look, I'm not the type of person who believes in ghosts or supernatural bullshit. I'm a pretty rational guy. I work in IT, I live in a cramped studio apartment in downtown Portland. And the most exciting thing that usually happens to me is when my neighbor's cat gets stuck in the hallway again. So when my friend Sarah asked if I wanted to house sit her place in Beaverton while she was backpacking through Europe for 3 weeks, I jumped at the chance. Her house is this beautiful 2-story colonial in one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods where the biggest crime is someone not bringing their trash cans in on time. After months of sirens and honking and the constant noise of city life, the idea of peace and quiet sounded like heaven. The house itself was perfect. Hardwood floors, a kitchen bigger than my entire apartment, and this amazing back deck that looked out over a landscape yard with these tall privacy fences. Sarah had left me a list of instructions. Water the plants, grab the mail, don't let her cat Machi get outside. Standard house-sitting stuff. The first week was exactly what I needed. I'd work from home during the day, then spend evenings on that back deck with a beer, listening to actual birds instead of traffic. I even started taking walks around the neighborhood after dinner, something I never did in the city because, honestly, you never know who's around the corner. But it was here, in this safe suburban bubble, where I learned that sometimes the most dangerous corner is the one in your own backyard. It started small, really small, the kind of thing you'd normally brush off without a second thought. I'd been there about 8 days when I came back from one of my evening walks. I'd started making them longer, exploring different streets, really enjoying the whole suburban experience. When I got back to Sarah's place, I noticed the gate to the backyard was slightly open. Just a crack, maybe an inch or two. I figured it was a gardener. Sarah had mentioned that Miguel came by on Wednesdays, and it was Wednesday. These things happen. You're in a hurry. You forget to latch a gate properly. No big deal. But that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard something outside. Just a soft sound, like someone brushing against a fence. You know how when you're in an unfamiliar place, every little noise seems louder? I chalked it up to that. The next morning, though, something fell off in the living room. The throw pillow on Sarah's couch, this bright yellow one she always kept perfectly fluffed, was compressed, like someone had been leaning against it. And the TV remote, which I always left on the coffee table, was sitting on the side table instead. I stood there for a good 5 minutes. Try to remember if I'd done that. Had I moved to that side of the couch the night before? Had I put the remote somewhere else? The thing is, when you're questioning yourself like that, you always end up convincing yourself you're just being paranoid. But then there were the emails. I was checking my work messages Friday morning when I saw them. 2 emails from my own address. That was already weird enough. But when I opened them, my stomach dropped. The first one, sent at 2:47 a.m., just said, "Don't forget to lock up tonight." The second one, sent at 3:12 a.m., "Thank you for letting me in." I stare at my screen for I don't know how long. The emails were definitely from my account. Same signature, same formatting I always use. But I sure as hell didn't send them. And who sends emails to themselves at 3 in the morning? I called my email provider, thinking maybe I'd been hacked. The customer service rep was polite but unhelpful. No unusual login activity. No sign of unauthorized access. "Sometimes email servers have delays," she said. "Maybe you sent these earlier and they're just showing up now?" But I knew I hadn't sent them. I was dead asleep at 3 a.m. that weekend. I started paying closer attention to everything. Every sound, every shadow, every tiny detail that seemed out of place. Saturday night, I heard it again, that soft brushing sound against the fence. This time, I got up and looked out the bedroom window. The backyard was dark except for the motion sensor light by the deck, but I could swear I saw movement near the far corner by the gate. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs, but by the time I got outside, there was nothing, just the gate, closed and latched properly. Sunday morning, I found muddy footprints on the deck. Small ones, like from sneakers. They led from the steps up to the sliding glass door, then stopped. I followed them with my eyes, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The sliding door was unlocked. I always lock that door. Always. I'm obsessive about locking doors, especially in a house that isn't mine. But there it was, unlocked, with muddy footprints leading right up to it. I spent that day installing a doorbell camera I bought at Home Depot, positioning it to watch the backyard. Sarah had mentioned she had a security system, but when I tried to access it, all I got was static. Every time I tried to pull up recent footage, the screen would just show white noise, like an old TV with no signal. Monday night, I set up camp in the living room with all the lights on, laptop open, ready to catch whatever was happening on the new camera. Around 1 a.m., I got a motion alert on my phone. My heart was pounding as I opened the app. The camera had a clear view of the back deck and most of the yard, and there, plain as day, was a figure standing by the fence. Small, wearing dark clothes, just standing there, watching the house. I grabbed the biggest knife from Sarah's kitchen and called out to the back door. I can see you. I'm calling the police. The figure didn't move. I called 911, whispering to the dispatcher about an intruder in the yard. They said they'd send someone right away. But when I looked back at my phone, the camera feed was just showing an empty yard. The figure was gone. The police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers who were professional but clearly skeptical. They walked the perimeter, checked the gate, looked for any signs of disturbance. Nothing. No footprints this time. No evidence anyone had been there at all. Sometimes these cameras can be glitchy, one of them said. Shadows, animals. Even wind can trigger false alerts. After they left, I sat up the rest of the night, watching that camera feed like a hawk. But nothing else happened. Tuesday was when I realized I wasn't dealing with some random prowler or confused neighbor. I came home from a grocery run to find my laptop moved. It had been closed and sitting on the left side of Sarah's dining table, and now it was open and on the right side. The browser was open to my email. There was a new message in my drafts folder. You have such a comfortable bed. My hands were shaking as I read it. This wasn't just someone messing with my email anymore. They had been inside, in the house. While I was gone, I called Sarah in Prague, but it went straight to voicemail. Her phone had been spotty the whole time she was traveling. I left a frantic message about the security system, about someone getting into the house, begging her to call me back. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. The house settling, the refrigerator humming, Machi walking around downstairs. I had dragged a chair in front of the bedroom door and kept the knife from the kitchen next to the bed. Around 4 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not the soft shuffling of a cat, not the creaking of old wood. Actual footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming up the stairs. I grabbed my phone and the knife, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might explode. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. I waited, holding my breath, for what felt like hours. Nothing. When the sun finally came up, I moved a chair and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but something had been left on the floor. A single yellow tulip, the same color as Sarah's throw pillow, fresh cut, with dirt still clinging to the stem. Wednesday morning, I was ready to pack up and leave. I didn't care about the cat, didn't care about watering Sarah's plants. I just wanted out. But first, I had to check something. I went to the guest room where I'd been sleeping and examined everything with the obsessive attention of someone whose sanity depended on it. The bed was made, I always made it, but the pillow was wrong. There was an indentation, a head-shaped depression, but not where I slept. I slept on the left side of the bed. This indentation was on the right side. Someone had been lying in that bed, next to me, while I was sleeping. My phone buzzed. A text from my own number. "You sleep so peacefully." That's when I ran downstairs and started throwing my stuff into my bag. I was done. Whatever game this was, whoever was doing this, I was out. But as I was packing, I noticed Machi sitting by the back door, staring at something outside. I followed his gaze and saw them, fresh muddy footprints leading from the gate, across the deck, up to the sliding door. But these weren't like the others. These continued past the door, around the side of the house, up to the front porch. They were inside the house somewhere. I grabbed my bag and ran for my car, not bothering to lock the front door behind me. I drove straight to a hotel downtown and called Sarah again, leaving another voicemail explaining that I was leaving, that someone had broken in, that she needed to call the police. I thought it was over. I thought I was safe. That night in the hotel, I finally felt like I could breathe. I ordered room service, took a long shower, tried to convince myself that the whole thing had been some elaborate prank or maybe just my imagination running wild in an unfamiliar place. I was just drifting off to sleep when my phone buzzed with a notification. New photo in my camera roll. I hadn't taken any photos that day. With shaking fingers, I opened the gallery. The most recent photo was time-stamped at 3:47 a.m. the night before, while I was sleeping in Sarah's guest room. It was a picture of me, sleeping, taken from the foot of the bed, looking down at me lying there completely vulnerable and unaware. In the dim light from the hallway, you could just make out another shape in the frame. Someone sitting on the edge of the bed, right next to me. The person was small, wearing dark clothes, and their face was turned toward the camera. But the photo was too dark, too blurry to make out any features. Just a dark silhouette sitting inches away from me while I slept. I dropped the phone and ran to the bathroom to throw up. When I finally worked up the courage to look at the photo again, I noticed something else. In the bottom corner, barely visible, was a timestamp and a familiar logo. It was from Sarah's security system, the one that had been showing nothing but static. Someone had access to those cameras, had been watching me the entire time, recording me. I never heard back from Sarah. Her social media went quiet after that week, and when I tried calling her parents, they said they hadn't heard from her either. The police said there was no evidence of foul play, that people go off-grid while traveling all the time. But I know someone was in that house. Someone who knew how to access the security system, who had keys, who had been planning this for who knows how long. And sometimes, late at night in my apartment, I get emails from my own address. Usually just 2 words. Thank you. I've changed all my passwords, gotten new locks, even moved apartments twice. But the emails keep coming. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed trying to fall asleep, I swear I can feel someone sitting on the edge of the mattress, just out of sight, watching me, waiting, learning. You know that feeling when you're staying somewhere that isn't home? Yeah, well, I thought I knew that feeling. Turns out, I had no idea. My name's Jake. I'm 28, work in marketing here in Chicago. Pretty normal guy. Nothing too exciting about my life. But 3 months ago, I had an experience that's made me question everything I thought I knew about privacy, about safety, about the places we trust to sleep at night. This isn't some ghost story or urban legend. This is about real people doing real things that'll make your skin crawl. And the worst part? It's probably happening right now to someone else in some other Airbnb across the country. So here's what happened. Back in April, I was going through this rough patch at work. You know how it is, deadlines crushing you, boss breathing down your neck, the whole corporate nightmare. I desperately needed to get out of the city for a weekend, clear my head, maybe actually sleep for more than 4 hours without my neighbor's dog barking at 3 a.m. I jumped on Airbnb Friday afternoon, looking for something last minute and cheap within driving distance. Most places were booked or way out of my budget, but then I found this little cottage about 2 hours north of Chicago. Rural area, lots of trees, the kind of place where you can actually see stars at night. The photos showed this cozy one-bedroom place with a stone fireplace, wooden furniture, very rustic and charming. The host was this elderly woman named Margaret. Her profile picture showed a sweet-looking lady in her 70s with silver hair and reading glasses. 5-star reviews across the board. Comments like, "Margaret's the sweetest host ever," and "felt like staying at Grandma's house." The property description mentioned she lived in the main house next door, and that the cottage was originally built for her late husband's woodworking hobby. I booked it immediately. $60 a night. Available that same weekend. Perfect. The drive up was exactly what I needed. Windows down, music playing, watching the city fade into farmland and forest. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, the sun was setting behind these massive oak trees, and the whole place looked like something out of a postcard. Margaret came out to greet me before I even got my bag from the car. Exactly like her photos, small, probably mid-70s, wearing a floral house dress and those thick-rimmed glasses. She had this warm, grandmotherly smile and spoke in that soft, gentle way that immediately puts you at ease. "You must be Jake. Oh, you look tired. Honey, long drive from the city?" She walked me over to the cottage, chatting about the area, pointing out where the hiking trail started, mentioning that she kept chickens if I wanted fresh eggs for breakfast. The cottage was exactly as advertised. Clean, cozy, smelled like pine and old wood. The bedroom had this huge 4-poster bed with a handmade quilt, and the main room had that stone fireplace with a stack of split logs ready to go. Margaret showed me how to work the old-fashioned pump for the well water, where the extra blankets were stored, how to get the best cell reception by the kitchen window. "Now, you just make yourself at home, dear. I'm right next door if you need anything at all. I'm usually up pretty late. Insomnia, you know how it is at my age, so don't worry about bothering me." She gave me this motherly pat on the arm. "The only thing I ask is that you keep the bedroom door locked at night. These old country houses, sometimes animals get in through loose boards. Raccoons mostly, but better safe than sorry." Seemed reasonable enough. After she left, I spent the evening exactly how I planned, built a fire, ordered pizza delivery. Surprisingly, they delivered even out there, and just decompressed. No emails, no work calls, just me and the crackling fireplace. I was in bed by 11, door locked like Margaret suggested, and slept better than I had in months. Saturday was perfect. Hiked the trails, read a book by the fire, grilled some burgers on the little barbecue out back. Margaret brought over those fresh eggs she'd mentioned, along with some homemade bread. We chatted for a bit on the porch. She told me about her late husband Harold, how he'd built a cottage himself, how they'd hosted family gatherings there for decades before deciding to rent it out. "Gets lonely out here sometimes," she said, looking out at the trees. "It's nice having people stay. Makes the place feel alive again." That night, I went to bed around midnight, again locking the bedroom door. But sometime in the early morning, maybe 3 or 4 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. Half asleep, I stumbled across the room, and that's when I noticed something weird. My suitcase was open. Now, I'm pretty organized when I travel. I keep everything zipped up, clothes folded a certain way, but the zipper was completely open, and it looked like someone had rifled through my stuff. Not stolen anything, just moved things around. My shirts were still folded, but differently. My toiletries were lined up on the dresser in a neat little row, which definitely wasn't how I'd left them. I stood there for a minute, trying to process this. Maybe I'd left it open and forgotten. Maybe the cottage had shifted during the night, and things had fallen out. I was exhausted, So I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to sleep. But Sunday morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I did a quick walk around the cottage, checking the windows, the door locks. Everything seemed secure. Margaret waved at me from her garden when I looked out the kitchen window, gave me that same warm smile. I was packing up to leave when I dropped my phone, and it rolled under the bed. As I reached for it, my hand bumped against something else, a small, leather-bound book wedged way back against the wall. A diary. It was old, the leather cracked and worn, but not ancient. Maybe 10 or 15 years old. The pages were filled with handwriting in blue ink, neat cursive script. And as I started reading, my blood went cold. The first entry I saw was dated just 2 weeks earlier. New guests arrived today. Young couple from Milwaukee. They seemed nice enough. The man snores terribly. I can hear from the kitchen window. The woman likes to shower at night, around 11 p.m. She uses lavender shampoo. Very particular about organizing her clothes. I moved a few things around to see how she'd react. She noticed but didn't say anything. They never do. I flipped to another page, hands shaking. Solo traveler this time. Businessman, maybe 40s. Drinks too much wine with dinner. Talks to himself when he thinks no one can hear. Keeps his laptop password on a sticky note in his briefcase. Blue Dog 123. Checked his emails while he was hiking. Nothing interesting, mostly were complaints. Left his bedroom door, unlocked the second night. Easy that way. Another entry. Family with 2 children. The parents fight after the kids go to sleep. Money problems. I think. The father sleeps on the couch most nights. The mother cries quietly in the bedroom. I watched her through the loose board behind the headboard. She's pretty when she cries. The children never suspect anything. Children never do. My hands were trembling as I flipped through page after page of this. Detailed observations about dozens of guests over what looked like several years. What they ate when they showered, how they slept, personal details that no one should know. And threaded throughout were these casual mentions of being inside the cottage while people were sleeping, moving their things, watching them. Then I found the entry that made my stomach drop. Jake from Chicago arrives today. Marketing, recently stressed about work. Drives a blue Honda Civic. License plate starts with X47. Likes to lock the bedroom door. That's fine. There are other ways in. Organized packer. Folds everything very precisely. I'll test that tonight. The date was Friday, the day I'd arrived. There was another entry dated Saturday. Jake's suitcase was easy. Everything folded so neatly, it was almost artistic. Move a few items around 3:15 a.m. while he was sleeping. He noticed this morning, but convinced himself it was nothing. They always do. Found his work laptop, password saved in the browser. Boring emails. But his personal photos are interesting, particularly the ones of his ex-girlfriend Sarah. He deletes them but doesn't empty the trash folder. Men are so predictable. I'm reading this, and I can barely breathe. This woman, sweet, grandmotherly Margaret, had been in the cottage while I was sleeping, had gone through my personal belongings, my laptop, my private files, had been watching me, documenting my habits like I was some kind of lab rat. But there was one more entry, dated that morning, Sunday. Jake leaves today. He's been jumpy since yesterday. Keeps checking the windows and locks. I think he suspects something, but he won't say anything. They never do. Last night I stood by his bed for almost an hour while he slept. He tosses and turns a lot. Guilty conscience about something, maybe the photos of Sarah. I hummed Harold's old lullaby, the one I sang to him when he was dying. Jake stirred but didn't wake up. Tonight the cottage will be empty again. I don't like it when the cottage is empty. I slammed the diary shut, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Last night, she had been in the room, standing by my bed, for an hour. While I slept, I grabbed my stuff and threw it in the car as fast as I could. Margaret wasn't in her garden anymore. but I could see a curtain move in her kitchen window. I didn't wave goodbye, didn't thank her for her hospitality. Just got in my car and drove. The whole way home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see her somehow following me. My hands were shaking so bad I had to pull over twice just to calm down. When I got back to Chicago, I immediately reported it to Airbnb. I told them about the diary, about Margaret's surveillance, about her being in the cottage while I slept. I sent them photos of the diary pages, screenshots of the entries mentioning me by name. You know what they told me? Thank you for your concern. We investigated the property and found no evidence of any diary or inappropriate behavior. The host has consistently excellent reviews and has been with our platform for over 5 years. We found no loose boards or alternate entrances to the cottage as described. We appreciate your feedback and will keep your comments on file. No evidence of any diary. I called the local police in that county. Tried to file a report. They said without concrete evidence of crime, there wasn't much they could do. Property owner has a right to be on their own property. No laws against keeping a journal. If nothing was stolen and no one was physically harmed, it was a civil matter at best. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. I went back on Airbnb a few weeks later, just to see if the listing was still active. It was 5-star reviews, just like before. But there were new ones now. Margaret is such a sweet host. Felt so safe and welcome at her cottage. Slept like a baby. Perfect getaway spot. Margaret really pays attention to details. She even rearranged my toiletries in a more organized way. Such a thoughtful touch. Stayed here with my girlfriend. Margaret was so accommodating and really made us feel at home. Highly recommend. I started screenshotting the reviews, cross-referencing the dates. I've been checking that listing every few weeks for the past 3 months. There's been a steady stream of guests. Couples, families, solo travelers. All leaving glowing reviews about Margaret's hospitality. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that diary. About what Margaret is writing in it now. About the new guests who don't know they're being watched, cataloged, studied like specimens. About the loose board behind the headboard. And the ways into cottage that don't involve doors. I think about Margaret standing in dark bedrooms, humming lullabies to sleeping strangers. The worst part? I keep getting emails from Airbnb suggesting I book another stay. Based on your previous trip, you might enjoy these similar properties. And sometimes, Margaret's cottage shows up in those recommendations. 5 stars, excellent host, makes you feel right at home. 3 months later, and I still lock my bedroom door every night, even in my own apartment. I check under the bed, in the closets, behind the curtains, because now I know how easy it is for someone to watch you, to study you, to be in your space while you're at your most vulnerable. And the thing is, Margaret was right about one thing. We never say anything. We convince ourselves we imagined it, that we're being paranoid, that surely no one would do something like that. We don't want to cause trouble, don't want to seem crazy. So they keep doing it, to the next guest, and the next one after that. If you're listening to this and you stayed in an Airbnb recently, do me a favor, check under the bed, look behind the furniture, and if you find anything that shouldn't be there, don't convince yourself it's nothing, because sometimes it's everything. Sweet dreams. I'm Marcus, 26, live in Brooklyn, or at least I did until about 6 weeks ago. I work freelance graphic design. Nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills. Or it did, until my landlord decided to renovate my building and basically forced everyone out with months' notice. Classic New York, right? So I ended up crashing at my buddy Danny's place in Queens while I figure out my next move. Danny and I went to college together. Stayed pretty close over the years. He's got this decent 1-bedroom apartment. Offered to let me sleep on his couch for a few weeks while I apartment hunted. Seemed like the perfect solution. But here's the thing about accepting help from friends. Sometimes you find out things about them you never wanted to know. Sometimes you realize the person you trusted isn't who you thought they were. And sometimes you discover that the scariest monsters are the ones who know exactly where you sleep. Danny's place was pretty typical for Queens. Pre-war building, thin walls, neighbors you could hear through the ceiling at all hours. The apartment itself was small but clean, one bedroom. Decent-sized living room where his couch sat facing a big window that looked out onto the courtyard. The couch was actually pretty comfortable, one of those sectional things with enough room to stretch out. Danny had set me up with pillows and blankets, cleared some space in the closet for my stuff. He was being a really good friend about the whole situation. Didn't make me feel like I was imposing or anything. Stay as long as you need, man. He told me that first night. I leave for work pretty early, usually out by 6:30 a.m., so you'll have the place to yourself most mornings. Just make yourself at home. The first week was actually great. Danny worked some corporate job in Manhattan, so he'd be gone by the time I woke up around 9 or 10. I'd spend the day job hunting, apartment searching, working on some freelance projects. Evenings, we'd hang out, order takeout, watch Netflix, catch up on old times. It felt like college again in a good way. The building itself was pretty noisy, old pipes that clanged at random times, neighbors above us who seemed to wear concrete boots, people in the courtyard talking loud at all hours. But you get used to city noise, you know? It becomes white noise after a while. At least, that's what I told myself when I started hearing things. It was probably the second week when I first noticed it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., to these sounds that didn't quite fit with the usual building noise. Footsteps, but careful ones, like someone trying not to be heard. And they seemed to be coming from inside the apartment. The first few times, I figured it was Danny getting up to use the bathroom or grab water from the kitchen. But when I'd check, his bedroom door would be closed, no light underneath, and the sounds always stopped the moment I sat up to listen. Then there was this one morning, I think it was a Tuesday, when I woke up to the strangest thing. I was lying there, still half asleep, when I heard this sound right next to my head. A sigh, deep, long, like someone had been holding their breath and finally let it out. My eyes snapped open, and I was completely awake instantly. The living room was empty, morning light streaming through the window. I checked the time, 7:15 a.m. Danny should have been at work already. I called out, "Danny, you still here?" Nothing. I got up and checked his bedroom. Bed was made, clearly hadn't been slept in recently. Checked the bathroom, the kitchen, even looked in the closets. The front door was locked from the inside, deadbolt engaged. All the windows were locked too, and we were on the 4th floor anyway. But I could have sworn someone had been standing right there next to the couch, right where my head was. The feeling was so strong I could still sense a presence, like the air was different in that spot. When Danny got home that evening, I mentioned it. Weird, man. I definitely left around 6:30 this morning. Maybe it was a dream? You know how realistic those can be sometimes. Made sense, I guess. I'd been stressed about finding a place, not sleeping great. Could have been my brain playing tricks on me. But then other things started happening. Little things at first. I'd wake up and find a glass of water on the coffee table that I didn't remember pouring. Not a big deal. Maybe I'd gotten up in the night and forgotten, except the glass was always ice cold, like it had just come from the fridge. Or I'd find my clothes arranged differently than I'd left them. My favorite hoodie laid out neatly on the back of a chair when I was pretty sure I'd thrown it on the floor the night before. My laptop moved from the coffee table to the kitchen counter, still plugged in, like someone had been using it. You sure you're not just forgetting stuff? Danny asked when I brought it up. I mean, you've been pretty stressed lately. Sometimes our brains don't form memories properly when we're anxious. He was probably right. I was stressed, sleep-deprived, living out of a suitcase. Easy to misremember small details. But the feeling of being watched was getting stronger. It started as just this vague unease when I was alone in the apartment. Like that sensation you get when someone's staring at you from across a room, except there was no one there. I'd be working on my laptop and suddenly get this overwhelming urge to turn around and check behind me. The feeling was strongest near the couch, especially when I was lying down. I'd be watching TV or scrolling through my phone, and this creeping awareness would wash over me that someone was observing me, studying me. I started sleeping with the lights on. "Everything okay, man?" Danny asked one night when he saw me setting up with the lamp on. "You seem kind of on edge lately." "Just having trouble sleeping. The streetlights outside are pretty bright anyway." "Yeah, this neighborhood's not great for that. White noise machine might help. I've got one in my room if you want to try it." He seemed genuinely concerned, which made me feel bad for being paranoid. Danny was letting me crash at his place rent-free, and here I was acting weird about every little thing. But the next morning, I woke up to find the lamp turned off. I always left it on when I went to sleep. Had been doing it for over a week at that point. But there I was, waking up in darkness at 6 a.m., the lamp switched off at the base. "Did you turn off the lamp in the living room?" I asked Danny when he got home. "What lamp?" "The one I've been sleeping with on. It was off when I woke up." Danny looked confused. "I didn't touch any lamps, dude. Maybe the bulb burned out." But the bulb was fine. When I tested it that evening, it worked perfectly. That's when I started getting really paranoid. Started checking the locks multiple times before bed, making sure all the windows were secure. I even put a chair against the front door, just in case. But the chair was always moved in the morning. Not far, just a few inches, like someone had gently pushed aside. The breaking point came about 3 weeks into my stay. I'd been lying awake for hours, that watch feeling so intense I couldn't relax. Every shadow in the room seemed to be moving. Every sound from the building made me tense up. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, those careful footsteps. But this time, they were definitely in the apartment. Soft, deliberate steps moving from the kitchen toward the living room. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps stopped right behind the couch. I could feel someone standing there. The presence was so strong, it was like a weight pressing down on me. And then I heard breathing, slow, steady, like someone trying to be quiet, but not quite managing it. I wanted to turn around, to confront whatever was behind me, but I was paralyzed. You know that feeling when you're a kid and you're convinced there's something under your bed, but you can't move to check? It was exactly like that, except I was 26 years old, and this was real. The breathing continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Then I heard movement. Something settling down, like someone sitting on the floor behind the couch. I must have eventually fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. Danny's bedroom door was open, bed unmade this time, and I could hear him in the shower. "Morning," he called out when he heard me moving around. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep much." I told him about the footsteps, the breathing, the feeling of someone being in the room. He listened with his concerned expression, nodding along. "Man, I think you might be having some kind of anxiety thing. All this stress about finding a place, sleeping somewhere new. Maybe you should talk to someone? I've got a friend who's a therapist. She's really good." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was losing it. But that night, I decided to do something about it. I set up my phone to record overnight. I propped it on the coffee table, angled so it would capture the couch and the area behind it. I told Danny I was doing it, framed it as trying to figure out if I was sleepwalking or talking in my sleep. "Good idea," he said. "Might give you some peace of mind." I went to sleep around midnight. Phone recording, lamp on. I'd made sure to mention to Danny that the phone would be filming all night, just in case he needed to move around the apartment for any reason. I slept terribly, kept waking up with that watch feeling, but I forced myself to stay still and not check behind me. If something was there, the phone would catch it. Morning came, and the first thing I did was check the recording. 8 hours of footage to go through. I fast-forwarded through most of it, just me tossing and turning on the couch, occasionally sitting up to look around. But around 5:30 a.m., something changed. I was lying on my side, facing away from the camera, when this shape started rising from behind the couch. Slowly, carefully, like someone had been crouched down and was gradually standing up. The shape was distorted, partially out of frame, but I could make out what looked like a head and shoulders. It paused there, perfectly still, like it was listening or watching me sleep. The figure stayed there for almost 10 minutes, just standing behind the couch, motionless, while I slept completely unaware just a few feet away. Then, as gradually as it had risen, it lowered itself back down, disappearing behind the couch again. I watched that section probably 20 times, my hand shaking. There was definitely someone in the apartment, someone who had been watching me sleep for who knows how long. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. In the video, you could see Danny's bedroom door in the background. It was closed the entire time. And at 6:15 a.m., about 45 minutes after the figure disappeared, the door opened and Danny came out, clearly just waking up. Whoever had been behind the couch, it wasn't Danny. Or it was Danny, and he'd somehow gotten back into his room without me seeing. I confronted him that evening, showed him the video on my phone. "Dude, what the hell is this?" I demanded, playing the section where the figure appears. Danny watched it, his face completely blank. "I don't know what you wanted to say, Marcus. That could be anything. Shadows, video compression artifacts, your phone camera glitching. That is clearly a person standing behind the couch. Is it? Because all I see is some blurry movement that could be literally anything. And you said I was in my room the whole time, right? Door was closed." "Yeah, but Dash, so what are you accusing me of exactly? That I'm sneaking around my own apartment watching you sleep? Why would I do that?" He seemed genuinely confused and a little hurt. And when I looked at the video again, trying to see it through his eyes, I had to admit it was pretty ambiguous. The figure was mostly out of frame, distorted by shadows and low light. It could have been a lot of things, but I knew what I'd felt. I knew someone had been there. "Look, maybe you should find another place to stay," Danny said quietly. "Not because I'm mad or anything, but you're clearly not comfortable here, and this paranoia thing is getting kind of intense." He was right. I wasn't comfortable there, and maybe I was being paranoid. I started looking for other places to stay that night. Reached out to some other friends, looked into short-term rentals I could actually afford. Within a few days, I'd found a sublet in Manhattan. Expensive, but worth it to get out of that apartment. The night before I left, I set up the phone to record one more time. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted confirmation that I've been imagining everything, that finding a new place would solve the problem. This time, I forced myself to stay awake, lay there with my eyes closed, pretending to sleep, waiting to see what would happen. Around 4 a.m., I heard the footsteps again. Soft, careful, moving from the direction of Danny's room toward the couch. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, tried to look asleep. The footsteps stopped right behind me, and I could feel that presence again. Someone standing there watching. But this time, I heard something else. A whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. "I'm gonna miss you." The voice was Danny's. I waited until I heard him move away, heard his bedroom door close, before I dared open my eyes. The living room was empty, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might wake the neighbors. The next morning, I didn't say anything to Danny about what I'd heard. Just packed my stuff, thanked him for letting me stay, and got out of there as quickly as possible. "Keep in touch, man," he said as I was leaving. "And hey, if you ever need a place to crash again." I told him I would, but I knew I wouldn't. I never looked at that final recording. Deleted it from my phone the moment I got to my new place. I didn't want to know what the camera had captured. Didn't want to see whatever Danny had been doing while he thought I was asleep. Because the worst part wasn't that he'd been watching me. The worst part was realizing he'd probably been doing it the entire time I'd stayed there. every night, waiting for me to fall asleep, then coming out to stand behind the couch and what? Just watch? Just breathe over me while I was completely vulnerable? Danny started calling me a few days after I moved out. Left voicemails asking how I was settling in, suggesting we grab drinks soon, acting like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't spent 3 weeks invading my privacy in the most intimate way possible. I stopped answering his calls, blocked his number eventually, but sometimes late at night in my new place, I still get that feeling, that sensation of being watched. And I wonder if Danny somehow found out where I moved to, if he's standing outside my building right now, looking up at my window, planning his next move. The thing about trust is that once it's broken, you can't really get it back. You start questioning everything, every friendship, every favor, every time someone offers to help you out. Because now I know how easy it is for someone to violate that trust. How simple it is to watch someone when they think they're safe, when they're at their most vulnerable. I've been in my new place for 6 weeks now, and I still sleep with the lights on. Still check the locks 3 times before bed. Still set up my phone to record sometimes, just to make sure I'm really alone. And when friends offer to let me crash at their place, I politely decline, get a hotel instead, even if I can't afford it. Because I've learned that the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under your bed or in your closet. They're the ones who have keys to your door, who know your schedule, who've earned your trust. They're the ones who wait until you're asleep to show you who they really are. So next time you're staying at a friend's place, pay attention to those little signs, the moved objects, the cold glasses of water, the feeling of being watched. Don't dismiss it as paranoia or stress. Sometimes your instincts are trying to tell you something important.